100 araw na po ang nakalipas mula ng aking sinimulan ang panunungkulan bilang Pangulo. May nagsasabi na itong first 100 days daw ang honeymoon period. Parang nangangapa pa. Pero parang hindi naman ganun ang aking naging pakiramdam. Dahil siguro pamilyar na rin ako sa trabaho, kaya't nakapagsabak agad. Malaking oras lang ang inilaan natin sa paghahanap ng sinasabi ng best and brightest ng mga appointee. Bagamat wala pa naman talaga tayo sa kalingkingan ng kabuuhan planong gusto nating ipatupad, nakapaglatag naman tayo sa tulong ng ating mga masisipag na kawanin ng gobyerno ng matibay na pundasyon bilang simula ng pinangako nating pagbabangon. Ang bawat sektor at departamento man ay may kinalaman at kaugnayan sa bawat isa. Tiniyak nating mabigyan ng sapat na atensyon ang mga pundasyong tinuturi nating sangkap ng isang masaganang lipunan. Para sa akin, ito ay kalusugan, kabuhayan at kapayapaan.
Ferdinand Bongbong Romualdez Marcos Jr. as the duly elected President of the Republic of the Philippines.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time, I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Hall. The big story tonight.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. wrapped up his first 100 days in office over the weekend.
This critical period gives the country a glimpse of how his full term might pan out. One News chief correspondent Ed Lingao gives us a rundown of some of the biggest stories in Marcos's first 100 days as president.
Rising prices of fuel and commodities, a weakening peso, a powerful earthquake hitting northern Philippines, and a super typhoon barreling across Luzon. These are some of the country's biggest headlines over the past 3 months and what could be the greatest challenges that the Marcos administration had to face in its first 100 days. In his State of the Nation address, President Bongbong Marcos vowed to make the country more disaster resilient and to boost the economy's recovery from a grueling pandemic. He said his administration also aims to address food security issues by helping local farmers increase production.
Ang mga pautang at financial assistance sa mga magbubukid at mangingisda ay magiging institusyon at patakaran ng aking administrasyon.
To reach these goals, Marcos appointed himself as Agriculture Secretary during his first month in office, giving himself direct responsibility to increase food output in the face of rising inflation. But controlling inflation proved to be a struggle to the Marcos administration. By the third month of his presidency, the country's headline inflation has already accelerated to 6.9%, the highest since October 2018. Data from the Energy Department, meanwhile, showed that the hike in gasoline prices stood at 14 pesos and 45 centavos per liter since the start of the year, while diesel saw a net increase of nearly 29 pesos per liter. Economists attribute the soaring prices as well as the weakening peso to global headwinds. Now, to address the rising prices of fuel, Marcos is looking into diversifying the country's energy sources, even revealing that he has been in talks with Russia for possible fuel supply.
Now we will look to what we describe as non-traditional suppliers of fuel. So we have certainly depended on Dubai. We watched the Dubai oil prices, but now maybe we need to approach Russia. The political side of it has been, of course, a little tricky, but nonetheless, the national interest comes first.
On top of a worrying economic situation, the country also faced huge environmental disasters, including the magnitude 7 earthquake that hit northern Luzon in July and Super Typhoon Karding that slammed the same island in September. In his speech at the 77th UN General Assembly, Marcos urged member states to act now against the climate crisis, saying its effects are the biggest threats affecting small countries like the Philippines.
Those who are least responsible suffer the most. We absorb more carbon dioxide than we emit. And yet, we are the fourth most vulnerable country to the effects of climate change. This injustice must be corrected.
To support economic recovery, the president secured at least 1 trillion pesos worth of investment pledges from foreign businessmen during his official visits to Singapore, Indonesia, and the U.S. To woo investors, Marcos even branded the Philippines as Asia's fastest rising economic star.
I thank you for your continuing interest in the Philippines which we are touting as, with great confidence, as Asia's fastest rising economic star.
Marcos's first 100 days as president, however, was marred by a string of controversies. Critics questioned the parties he hosted in Malacanang. His office has proposed 4.5 billion pesos in confidential and intelligence funds. And more recently, his unannounced trip to Singapore to watch the F1 Grand Prix. Despite these challenges and controversies, Marcos Jr. is so far confident that his administration has achieved a functional government, one that is composed of what he claims are the best and brightest officials.
I think what we have managed to do in the first 100 days is put together a government which is functional and which has a very, very good idea of what we are targeting in terms of strict economic targets.
To give us his assessment of Marcos's first 100 days as president, we have with us on the show Senate Minority Leader Coco Pimentel. Welcome to The Big Story.
Thank you for inviting me, Roby and Gretchen, and sa lahat po, magandang gabi.
Senator, so your take, first 100 days of President Marcos.
Well, if you want me to grade him, I was once upon a time a law professor. Mataas po ako maggrado, mabait ako. kaya pasado naman po.
Okay, but I mean, pagka sinabi niyo pong pasado, what are some of the things where you would rate him as more than passable, and what are some of the things that keep him from having a higher grade than passing?
Number one, some of his appointments are great people, very good people. But, he made some mistakes. Kaya mayroong mga resignations, may mga konting reorganization. Maybe ako siguro, I'm willing to accept that as part of birth pains. But the deterioration of the peso to the dollar, exchange rate, the inflation rate, ayan po, these are matters that, there must be, at least after 100 days, there must already be a plan or a way of thinking, an economic way of thinking that this administration should subscribe to and test and try and implement, diba? On how to counter all of these developments which make life more difficult here in the Philippines. Meron pang mga breakdown in law and order, yung mga patayan, high-profile assassinations, these all taint the 100 days of the president.
Given the pressing need to address economic woes, inflationary pressures, as well as the weakening currency, do you think the Marcos government has been proactive enough in addressing, or are we subject to global pressures, global trends, and is what we're seeing now all that we can do at the moment?
We cannot always blame the rest of the world on our problems. So ganun yun. Although the entire world is feeling some inflationary pressure, the administration must subscribe to some theory. How do we counter this? How do we lighten to ease the inflationary pressure? So this has yet to be announced. And then there are two ways. Monetary policy, that is the jurisdiction or realm of the Bangko Sentral. The fiscal policy is the budget. Paano yung budget? The budget has more than 9 billion in confidential and intelligence funds. Is this a wise way of spending money? Then if you're spending money this way, you're contributing to inflation. So, ganun sana. I mean, there must be a way of thinking, a philosophy, governance philosophy, that this administration should subscribe to, announce it well, and then make actions be consistent with words.
Senator, many analysts are saying we are in for an even worse food crisis and a price crisis for that matter. The Department of Agriculture itself projecting that there will be a 20% increase in the price of rice in the coming month. Do you think it was wise for President Marcos to take on the Department of Agriculture portfolio?
I think it is correct to focus on agriculture, but then appoint your alter ego. May alter ego ka, appoint a full-time secretary who is an expert on agricultural issues. When we say expert, naka-quotation marks yan, because we can be an expert and yet not understand the current situation and commit mistakes. Okay lang yun, but you have the full-time secretary must at least be familiar with how the DA works and then the agricultural issues that our country has for generations faced. So dapat familiar siya doon. So okay yung focus. The focus must be on agriculture, agricultural productivity, food production. But then if you appoint a secretary, therefore may katulong ka. Diba? If you yourself, if you are the secretary yourself, then wala kang katulong. So that's the main idea. Sana given the sugar fiasco, this should have been an eye-opener that he needs to appoint a full-time secretary of agriculture so that may dagdag na tutulong sa kanya. But the focus must still be on agriculture.
Senator, the first 100 days indicate the direction of this government, and given that the president has had 4 international trips during his first 100 days, the most amongst post-EDSA presidents, do you agree with this posturing at very early in his administration? And what can you say about the tone of his visits to Indonesia, to Singapore, and to the United States?
The visits to Indonesia and then to Singapore, okay po yun. These are our ASEAN brothers, and Indonesia is considered the big brother in ASEAN. The visit to the United States, okay din po yun because this is our treaty ally, our long-time historical ally or partner, and then he spoke before the United Nations, okay din po yun to give the Philippines a higher profile at the international scene. It is the last visit which is problematic. The visit to Singapore to watch a race, a car race where fuel is being unnecessarily burned and wasted. So sayang po yun. I mean, I think that was a mistake, a wrong decision to go abroad and then claim that it is part of your break or relaxation, and then watch a car race where fuel, very expensive fuel, is being burned and wasted.
Thank you very much. That was Senate Minority Leader Coco Pimentel. Now, after the break, we'll talk about the big numbers of President Marcos's first 100 days in office. That and more when a big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
The effects of climate change are uneven and reflect an historical injustice. Those who are least responsible suffer the most. The Philippines, for example, is a net carbon sink. We absorb more carbon dioxide than we emit. And yet, we are the 4th most vulnerable country to the effects of climate change. This injustice must be corrected, and those who need to do more must act now. We accept our share of responsibility and will continue to do our part to avert this collective disaster.
Economy
here to there. It really is a reflection, in my view, is a reflection more on the strength of the dollar. And we must remember that the dollar always does well in times of uncertainty. It's a safe haven, it's considered a safe haven currency. But so far, as I said, we have chosen to pay attention to the inflation rate, and I think we have managed to. We are the last month we are still running at around 4.7% through the year. It has increased a little bit, so we have raised interest rates a little bit as well. We have already we have raised it at 75 basis points twice already. Trying because the Fed has been very, very aggressive in terms of raising their rates for.
You started to slow down, though. Governor Medalla was telling us yesterday 50 basis points as well, right? So, what do you make of that amount of hikes from now on?
The high amount
50 basis points rate hike.
Yes, because really inflation is something that we have to deal with. It has gone in terms of basic commodities, agricultural commodities, general costs to everyday requirements of ordinary people.
Marcos Jr. as the duly elected President of the Republic of the Philippines.
Let's take a look at some of the big numbers of the first 100 days of President Bongbong Marcos. The president has so far made 4 international trips in the first 100 days since he won the 2022 polls. 2 of those 4 are considered state visits, namely his visit to Indonesia and his first trip to Singapore, while his trip to the United States was considered a working visit. His recent trip to Singapore earlier this month was met with criticism after he was spotted watching the Formula One Grand Prix. The palace, however, said that the visit was still a very productive one. Of those 4 trips, Marcos Jr. said he was able to secure around $18.5 billion worth of investment pledges, $14.36 billion of which came from state visits to Indonesia and Singapore. Now, the other $3.9 billion came from his visit to the United States. The president and his administration, meanwhile, will have a huge budget for the upcoming year. 5.268 trillion pesos. That's the proposed national budget for 2023. That is 4.9% up from this year's national budget. House leaders are expected to pass the 2023 budget before the October recess. Included in the 2023 national budget request is 9.2 billion pesos in confidential funds, 4.5 billion pesos of which will go to the office of the president. Now, as its name suggests, confidential funds are for confidential expenses related to surveillance activities in civilian government agencies that are intended to support their mandate or operations. Now, in his first 100 days in office, President Marcos already received 3 resignations from key officials. First to resign was former Executive Secretary Vic Rodriguez, citing the need to be present for his young family. Next to resign were former Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles and Commission on Audit Chairman Jose Calida. And in his first 100 days in office, President Marcos has had about 10 vlog entries in his YouTube channel. Marcos Jr. said he and his team agreed to keep his vlog despite his busy schedule and expected heavy workload in order to inform the public about his administration's actions and programs.
And here to share her insights about the first 100 days of President Marcos Jr., we have on the line Senator Grace Poe. Good evening and welcome to The Big Story, Senator.
Hi, good evening, Robbie, and good evening, Gretchen, and to your viewers.
Senator, your assessment of the first 100 days of President Marcos?
Well, my perspective, I'm happy that the bill that I've been pushing for and was vetoed in the last administration has finally passed. This is the SIM Card Registration Act. Now, actually, it's just called SIM Registration Act. Now, I think that we're quite pleased with most of his appointees. Of course, there are a lot of things that cannot be accomplished within 100 days, but we see that there's quite there's concern among the public when it comes to inflation, which I think Congress as well as the executive is going to try to work together to find a remedy for this.
Nabanggit po yung inflation, and Pulse Asia surveys is showing that it is one of the highest concerns for the Filipino public at this point. Economists have been trying to be very fair when it comes to inflation. They're saying a lot of it is caused by external factors and so on. But in your mind, granting external factors, how much of our economic problems are nonetheless self-inflicted, whether by missed opportunities or outright mistakes?
Well, okay, I tend to agree with most economists when they say that it's really a global concern. Now, there are things that are beyond their control, like fuel prices, OPEC deciding to cut on production. But then, what can we do? I really think that we have to act immediately so that we can have at least the relief in the coming months. But right now it's kind of too late because we're waiting for the harvest season for most of the crops that are now highly priced. Like for example, ang presyo ng pulang sibuyas nasa 200 plus. Kung may mabibili ka namang puting sibuyas, nasa 400 plus, di ba? So, kailangan natin talagang makipagpulong sa mga magsasaka, sa mga kooperatiba, kung gaano ba karami ang ating maasahan na ani nila sa mga darating na buwan, dahil kailangan din natin punuan ng pag-importa, pero yung polisiya na hindi naman makakasama doon sa mga lokal na mga magsasaka natin. So, importante talaga na mag-usap-usap ang iba't ibang mga sektor kasama ng ehekutibo. Kasi ang problema talaga ngayon, tuloy-tuloy ang dagok eh. Nandyan yung mga kalamidad, nandyan din yung mga nandyan din yung gera, nandyan din yung produksyon ng fuel, di ba? So mataas ang gasolina. Next week or ngayon pa lang, tinatayang tumaas na naman ang presyo ng gasolina. Kaya kung sasabihin natin kailangan ng agarang solusyon, siguro mahirap mangako niyan ang executive, no? Kasi kailangan talaga nila makipag-usap pa at direktang malaman sa mga nagtatanim at saka sa mga nag-i-import kung ano ba talaga ang dapat natin gawin. Dapat rin mapapagkatiwalaan natin ang customs officials natin kasi maraming reklamo sa sektor ng agrikultura na talagang pumapatay sa kanilang industriya ay ang walang tigil na pag-smuggle na hindi naman natin hindi napapantayan o kaya naglalagay lang siguro kaya nare-release.
Alright, maraming salamat po, Senator Grace Poe. Still to come, we will look into the first 100 days of Vice President and Education Secretary Sara Duterte. The big story will be back after this short break. Keep it here on One News.
As for the horror stories that we have heard about the poor quality of educational materials and supplies that are being given to our schools, this must end. And once again, I am not talking about history or what is being taught. I am talking about materials that are necessary for effective teaching in this day and age. The raw talent is there in our young people. It is up to our educational system to develop and to refine that great pool of talent.
RTC on Monday. They demanded De Lima's immediate release after more than 5 years in detention. Past 1 o'clock this afternoon, De Lima arrived at the Muntinlupa RTC to attend the bail hearing in connection to the illegal drug case filed against her. She personally attended the hearing despite having been held hostage in her detention cell in Camp Crame on Sunday.
Hi ma'am, how are you? Kumusta po? Kumusta ma'am?
Well, okay naman siya. Ang talagang kino-complain niya talaga sa amin yung may numbing pain pa rin daw sa dibdib. Bunga nung pagkakadiin nung pointed object sa kanya. Yes, na merong na-clear naman siya doon at hematoma lang kasi may hematoma pa. So, nag-undergo siya ng ECG, na-clear naman, tapos mag-2D echo rin siya. All possible medical procedures will be taken para talagang totally ma-clear siya.
The witness against De Lima, Herbert Colango, also appeared in the hearing. He was expected to undergo cross-examination. But the hearing was cut short because De Lima was exposed to Interior Secretary Benher Abalos, who tested positive for COVID-19.
Pero yun nga, sayang lang ang pagkakataon na matuloy na yung hearing ngayon. Kompleto na sana yung both sides. Pinagkataka lang namin nung nakapasok na kami saka lang nilabas.
Meanwhile, De Lima's camp is also considering the offer to transfer the former senator to another detention facility, as well as the possibility of undergoing home for loan. But for now, De Lima will be staying at the PNP General Hospital. Her next hearing scheduled on October 24th. For News 5, Marlene Alcaide, we are One News.
Good afternoon. Mr. President, I'm Ted Anthony from the Associated Press. It's very nice to meet you. Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
The purpose really that I have brought to this visit here in New York, in the peripheries of the UN General Assembly, has been to try to reintroduce the Philippines to our American friends.
Marcos Jr. as the duly elected President of the Republic of the Philippines.
Livelihood and education were the promised focus of Vice President Sara Duterte for her first 100 days in office. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to this story.
In her first day as Vice President, Sara Duterte and her office provided social services in different parts of the country.
We have initiated watershed decisions that would strengthen its mandate and will enable the office to serve more and more Filipinos across the country.
The OVP has since provided 134 million pesos in medical and burial assistance funds. Add to that the OVP's Libreng Sakay program, which has helped around 98,000 commuters in Metro Manila and in Davao. Duterte is also planning to buy the Coconut Palace in Pasay as a permanent office for future vice presidents. Aside from this, Duterte spent her first 100 days trying to strengthen the country's bilateral relationship with other countries by holding engagements with the diplomatic corps and foreign officials. But despite all these accomplishments, education spokesperson Michael Pao said Duterte was most proud of the resumption of face-to-face classes. However, the plan on having 100% face-to-face classes in November is still being reconsidered amid reports of students and teachers getting infected with COVID-19.
So meron kaming report na ginagawa ngayon para sa Pangulong Marcos at makapagdesisyon siya kung ano po yung ways forward natin with regard to the options na binibigay natin sa ating mga eskwelahan.
The Vice President, though, met with heavy criticisms in her first 100 days in office. Such was the issue in the increase of the salary of teachers. She pointed out that the pay hike for public school teachers could be the cause for closure of more private schools. The confidential funds of the OVP and DepEd also became controversial. Duterte is asking 150 million pesos in confidential funds for the Department of Education, while 500 million pesos for the OVP. She said that she's leaving it up to Congress to decide whether her office will get to keep the confidential funds allotted in the 2023 budget. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, The Philippine Star, and Business World Online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more analysis. I'm Robbie Alampay.
The big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. I'm Gretchen Ho. Stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.